Hello and welcome to Firstpost. We're here on the sidelines of the Raisina dialogue, and there's one issue that everybody's talking about here, and that's the war in Ukraine and how to solve it. And let's discuss this conflict with my guest right now, the Defense Minister of Netherlands, Mr. Ruben Brekelmans. I hope I got that right.
Perfect.
Thank you. Let's talk about what happened last week in Russia, where the Russian president said he's open to the idea of a ceasefire, but he's got certain clarifications that he wants from the United States. Do you think he's serious about this, or is he just buying time?
We have to wait and see. So far, I haven't seen much willingness from the Russian side and from Putin to compromise. And I think that is important because if you look at the demands from Putin so far, I think they are unacceptable. They are unacceptable when it comes to Ukraine, and they are acceptable when it comes to the rest of Europe. For example, his requirement or his demand to move around troops in Europe. That's something that we decide on ourselves. It's not something that is for Putin to decide. So let's see if he is serious. I think the ball is in his court. It's important that we put pressure on him, and not only at the negotiation table, but also, for example, by sanctions and by enforcing sanctions. And then let's see how serious he is.
Last year, your country hit the NATO target of 2% of its GDP being set aside for defense. But now the US President Donald Trump is sort of shifting the goalpost. He says, let's spend 5% of our GDP on defense. Is that something the Netherlands is committed to doing going forward?
We are starting now to have these discussions in the Netherlands. We had a new government starting over half a year ago, in which we set the 2% in our budget, also in the longer term. We also just passed a law in our parliament saying that this 2% should also be in our law, so in legislation. And we are now having a discussion or starting the discussion on whether to raise our spending. I think there are many politicians and many people in the Netherlands saying that we should increase our spending on defense. But the more difficult question is, how are we going to finance that? And you can do this by either raising taxes or cutting costs or raising the debt level. And of course, all three options are not optimal. So we need to find a compromise there. And that's taking some time because we are talking about serious amounts here. If you move from 2 to 3%, for example, for the Netherlands, that would mean additional budget of 10 to 12 billion every year. And for the Netherlands, that's quite big. So we need to have this political discussion. But I'm hopeful that we will find a solution over the next couple of weeks and months.
President Trump has also been saying that if NATO countries don't spend enough, he's simply not going to defend them, which is not technically what the NATO Charter says. But as a result of that, we've seen a rearmament bid in Europe, with every country setting aside billions of dollars or euros on their defense. Do you think the long-term plan is for Europe to defend itself without any reliance on the United States?
I think it's not that black and white, but what we do need to do as Europe is to invest more. We need to produce more, also in terms of our industry, in order to be able to defend ourselves and to take more responsibility for our own security. And at this point, we are too reliant on the United States. There are, for example, some strategic capabilities that only the United States can deliver. And we need to make sure that we, as European countries, that we are taking over more of that responsibility. I think it would be good to create a roadmap together with the United States to see how we can take over some of the responsibilities over time. So we can do this in close coordination. And I think it's good that Donald Trump and that President Trump and that the US administration is pushing European countries to do more, because we should take more responsibility ourselves.
And one emerging debate in Europe is also about sharing nuclear weapons. The French have offered to share their nuclear arsenal, and there is talk of the Brits also possibly pitching in. The Germans and the Poland say they're open to hosting these French and British nukes. Is that something the Netherlands is also open to?
I think it's good that this discussion is now starting in Europe. It's good that, for example, President Macron has raised this issue, because over the last 30 years, I don't think we had an open conversation about this. My generation, I grew up after the Cold War, so this is not part of our vocabulary anymore. When I grew up, 9/11 was, of course, a big event. The terrorist attacks that happened also in Europe and in the Netherlands as well had a major influence on our security perception. And you don't need nuclear weapons against terrorists. So this was not part of the conversation. I think it's good now that this issue is raised now and that we have a conversation about this. I think that in the end we will the United States needs to be involved. We cannot create a nuclear umbrella ourselves unless we invest heavily in nuclear weapons. And of course, we are still in favor of non-proliferation. So I don't see this happening that the UK and France and others are taking over the responsibility completely. But we can see if there is more that others can do. Take, for example, the Netherlands. We have F-35 fighter jets. They are nuclear capable, so our F-35s can carry nuclear weapons. We were the first in Europe which has been able to do that. And those can also be ways to share the burden. But we always need to have the United States on board to maintain our nuclear umbrella.
Just a final question on Ukraine. With the way the peace talks are going right now, do you see a scenario in which this war can be ended without Ukraine making any concessions, whether it's about neutrality or the land that's been occupied by Russia? Do you think that's a realistic scenario right now?
If you look at the battlefield, unfortunately, that is, I don't think that's realistic. I think to some degree concessions need to be made because at this point we see that Russia has a stronger position on the battlefield. So what we need to do is to make sure that Ukraine is getting into a stronger position by supporting them militarily and also helping them with robust security guarantees. And we should try to weaken Russia by putting sanctions, more sanctions, enforcing those sanctions, and by other ways of pressuring them. And then I hope that there can be an outcome of a diplomatic process which is a good deal, a strong deal, which provides robust security to Europe and does not lay the ground for any future aggression. Because if Russian aggression is rewarded now, we know one thing for sure, that Putin will not stop and that his ambitions will go further in Ukraine, but also in other parts of Europe. And we need to prevent that. So what we need is peace through strength, robust security guarantees, and not rewarding Russian aggression.
Thank you so much, Minister, for speaking to Firstpost.
Do you think that Ukraine is at its weakest position?
This war is not about Ukraine.
Do you believe that your president was insulted? Yes or no question. Is Ukraine prepared to pay the price for that peace?
No compromises at the cost of territorial integrity and sovereignty.
Diplomacy will work?
Yes,
Do you think
will.
Russia will give up the territory if there is no ceasefire? Do you propose to keep fighting?
We are ready to resist.
Do you think there will be peace?
Many countries gave us 3 days.
President Trump said you don't have any cards.
We do not have another choice.
How do you keep fighting?
You ask me once again the same question.
Because you've not answered my question.
We have enough capacities to keep fighting.
Firstpost brings you the Ideas Pod at the Raisina Dialogue 2025, the largest gathering of global policymakers, thought leaders, and innovators, now on the fastest growing international news platform. Big ideas, big debates, big impact. Only at the Ideas Pod.
Raisina Hill.
Firstpost gives you front row access to the conversations that matter most. The Ideas Pod. Raisina Dialogue 2025 on Firstpost. From March 17th to March 19th.